I think I found that I had some very good conversations and opened some people up a bit about things that they didn't necessarily talk to other people about.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk a little bit about some of my issues, and it was helpful, I think. I mean, it's helpful for me, if nothing else, but I think it helped other people too.
If I think about it in the IT industry and even just work related, to say that you need some help is a sign of weakness, and in the sense that, could this jeopardize my job? Are people going to look at me differently? Definitely. Hi, this is Daryl as a Service, here with Marc Anderson. It is one of my Movember talks, and thankfully we've got a good friend of mine here, Marc. How are you, Marc?
I'm great, Daryl, and I'm sorry I don't have that really cool accent like you. I just talk like a boring old American. USA.
Oh, no. It's all relative, isn't it? Like I sit back and think, oh well, South Africans, they're so cool, they sound so awesome. Australians, not so much, because they're just across the ditch.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for joining me, Marc, because it is quite a serious topic, and I know that you've supported Movember in the past. This year, what moved me to do it good and proper, and more than just grow facial hair, was because it's covering mental health, and really the big picture of making sure that people don't end their lives in one way or another, or are dying too young. So yeah, that was important to me, and I'm thinking of the mental health in the IT industry. And hey, you're in the IT industry.
Yeah. Whoa. Who knew?
Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, I think the Movember is great, and I did grow some lip fuzz for quite I guess 3 or 4 years for it. And it always devolved into a full beard, so my wife sort of poo-pooed it, and I'm not doing it. I'm very much behind the ideas, and I think that men's health is a distinctly different thing than women's health. Not to take anything away from what women have to deal with. But I think that as men, we're socialized in ways that mean that we have to think about things a little bit differently for ourselves. We have some different body parts, of course, which means that we have physical differences. But I think some of the mental things come a lot out of the sort of socialization and how we're brought up as little boys and turn into men with that same conditioning.
Yeah, it is different, and I guess the different kinds of pressures. I mean, men and women, we all face this pressure to maintain a certain image or a certain, way that we conduct ourselves. But what I do find with men is that we talk less about these sorts of problems, particularly mental health, and where we might be struggling with topics like depression.
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with age. I think back when I was a kid, back in the '60s, if you can believe it. I guess that's the 1960s, not the 1860s. A lot of the things that we were taught in into the '70s was to be very tough. Get up, brush it off. Don't cry. All of that sort of stuff. And then in the '70s, it was very confusing because everyone was supposed to be, sympathetic and touchy-feely and sensitive, and so it was sort of a set of mixed messages that I think confused a lot of people in my generation. And we're all sort of still working on it and trying to figure it out. I'm in my late 50s and I don't have all the answers, but I think I finally, around the time I hit 50, started to feel better about myself, having worked for years to try to figure out how all this should work in a professional situation, in a personal situation. How can I have confidence in myself when I'm not supposed to talk about the fact that I might not have confidence in myself?
Yeah.
Vulnerability, I think, is especially in a lot of men, again, my generation, or depending on how you were brought up, it could be somebody who's 10 years old today, but I think vulnerability is seen as a weakness, and I think really vulnerability can be a strength. Not just saying, "Hey, I'm screwed up. I need help," but coming up with a way to have these discussions like we're having right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a balancing act across many of these things. The balancing act of how much is too much bravado or putting yourself out there, versus feeling like you're an imposter, or how much is being too vulnerable and feeling like you are weak versus being authentic and giving people permission around you to also be authentic.
Yeah, yeah. I quite a few years ago, so to lay it on the table, I've had some problems with depression in my life, and I am an alcoholic. And one of the reasons I think I was an alcoholic is that I say was an alcoholic because I haven't had a drink in, knock on something, for over 11 years now. But I think one of the reasons I was an alcoholic was that I was medicating my depression. I wasn't talking to anybody about how I felt inside. I was dealing with it by drinking a lot. And, now that I don't drink, I realize I thought everyone was just drinking as much as I was. And it turns out I was drinking a lot more. And I wasn't a social drinker. I was a drinking drinker. So there were a lot of things that does to somebody. But, it was not, when we think of mental health, drinking too much is potentially a mental health problem. It's an addiction. But I think for me, it was really actively masking some of the feelings I had underneath, some of those feelings of depression and a lack of self-worth. And I had this crazy view that I had to drink in order to sort of tamp everything down to survive, which now that I don't drink, realize was exactly the opposite of what was actually happening. Because I haven't become something by taking care of myself, as opposed to becoming something by using artificial means to make myself okay. So that applied to every job I ever had, and I've been in some sort of technical field for my whole career, or at least close to technical stuff. And the fact that somebody else always knew more than I did, and I felt like an imposter, and I felt like I had to be did, but I never really felt like I was. All of those strange feelings that we all have. I think no matter how good you are at something, you probably have some of these feelings. And I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff to sort of survive all of that. And it wasn't productive. It wasn't good. It wasn't good for me, and it wasn't successful.
Yeah. Look, I relate to a lot there, and I think I know it's not just limited to the IT industry. The pressure of looking around and seeing how others are doing, and that we're always comparing ourselves to others, and trying to meet those expectations. It starts to put expectations on ourselves, and when we're not meeting that, we beat ourselves up. And we reach out to whatever our addiction is. In your case, it was having a drink, and it could be anything. And that behavior in itself, the addictive behavior, and when we reach out to that thing we depend on, is where it becomes a mental health issue. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I think that addiction becomes your best friend. Whether it's a bottle or a syringe or a pill. I think those things become your support mechanism, as opposed to the people around you or your own sort of introspection, or working things out on your own, which is not, that isn't, by saying we need to be vulnerable and we need to reach out and get help from people, that doesn't mean that we don't need to take some ownership ourselves. You have to work on, I believe, this is my opinion, of course, but I believe we have to work on this stuff ourselves and not rely on everyone else to sort of pull us up. It has to be a combination of those things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
For instance, you don't stop an addiction until you decide that it's time to stop, unless somebody puts you in jail for it.
Yeah.
So, rock bottom is that concept in AA and NA and stuff, where you hit rock bottom and you say, "Oh my God, my life is a mess." Well, you still have to decide that that's your rock bottom. You have to decide things are bad enough that you make a change. No one else can do that. My wife was telling me for years to stop drinking. I didn't listen to her. The more she told me that, the more I wanted to drink because it made me unhappy.
Yeah.
So we have to own this stuff. If we feel, I have to own my depression. I have to own the fact that I drank too much. I have to understand that if I want to not be a depressed person, I have to do some therapy. I have to take some medication that's going to make me feel better if that's appropriate.
Yeah.
There are different things that we can do, but it's not something we can push off. We can just rely on other people for. We have to be strong ourselves. And unfortunately, that's one of the hardest parts of this, is we have to be strong, but we can't be stoic. We can't be strong to the point of not letting other people help us. And that can be people you work with. I've had some tremendous work friends who've been very supportive about things that I've struggled with, of various types. My partner in some praxis, Julie, we talk about this stuff very openly, but we until recently, and when Todd joined us, we were a 2-person company. We don't have a big political environment that we have to sort of navigate. We can talk to each other about the stuff that we struggle with and support each other. So you can find that stuff in the work that you do, I would expect anywhere, but you do have to be a little more careful, I think, if it's a larger organization and people are always jockeying for position and all that other nonsense that happens.
Yeah, I agree. Look, tell me, you talked about you have to come to a point where you do need to take ownership of the problem, of recognizing that you do need help. What is it, that tipping point that maybe it is that you get arrested, you're in jail, and someone and the judge is saying you've got to do a program. Like, even then, if you don't want help, you're not going to get help, right? You're going along to some session and you're just like, oh, this is just what I have to do to get through my probation or whatever. But what is that tipping point? What helped you to really say, look, I need help, and that became your foundation for building your way out?
Yeah. I just to hit on your earlier point there, I remember when I was going to AA, and I went for about 6 months before I decided it wasn't necessarily the right thing for me. But I remember that there were people in there who were court mandated to be there, and they'd get their piece of paper signed, and then they'd bolt. They weren't there for them. They were there because someone made them be there, and they weren't going to get better. They weren't going to solve their problems because they hadn't decided that yet. For me, I wish that there was a good, like some powerful transformative story here. But I was drunk one night on a Saturday night, and I, ducked into the other room and took a pull from a bottle I had hidden, and I just thought, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I'm hiding this from my wife. I'm hurting myself. I'm not gonna. I was starting to feel that I might not survive it, and so I walked into the other room. I told my wife what I'd been doing. I got on the phone with a therapist I'd been seeing, and said, I'm not going to drink anymore, and I quit that day. Now that's very unusual. If somebody somebody who has a drinking or other addiction problem, to quit on one day like that it's sort of, I'm not saying this to build myself up. I'm just saying it's very unusual. So I think it's usually a much tougher battle than that. People fail a lot more. It's like quitting smoking. You quit, and then you start again, and you quit and you start again, and it takes a long time. And for me, it was just like a switch. But I think that if people feel like they have a problem and they decide that they need to change that, that's the switch, right? It's not that you have a problem. I knew I had a problem all along. That wasn't a surprise to me. But I decided that day that it was time to change. That's why I really think strongly, especially having seen people in AA and use, that the fact that you're sort of working on it doesn't mean you've decided. See what I mean? It's like, it's that, to me, is that moment. And it could be a moment, it could be 6 months where you're sort of dancing around it, but you have to tell yourself it's time.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. It isn't a common thing for people to say that's it and flick that switch. I've heard a few stories, but the more common, what will happen more often is you will fall off the wagon, so to speak, or slip back into an old habit. I think the mindset needs to be, I'm going to get back up again. I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to try and form this new habit. I'm going to reach out for help and lean on something else that's more healthy, and not beat yourself up, because I think that's also that depression cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, and making a mistake. If I took a drink and decided I'm now doomed, that's not going to be constructive. If I took a drink and said, I screwed up, I need to keep working on this, that would be productive.
Yeah.
So, most people do fail a whole bunch of times. You might quit drinking or doing whatever it is you do. You might quit smoking, you might quit drinking, you might stop taking pills, whatever, for 3 months, and then be totally fine, and then blow it. And the trick there is to dust yourself off and say, all right, I just reset the clock, and now I'm counting those days again. And there's a way to get there. It's just hard, and it's work. And I'm not saying it was easy for me. I'm just saying that it happened that day. I was pretty unpleasant to be around for a while. Apparently, we don't always know that ourselves, but it's not like it was an instant law. The light coming down from the heavens. It was just that was the moment for me. And I think everybody has one of those, and hopefully everybody has one who needs it at some point, no matter how many times they've fallen down and gotten themselves back up.
Yeah, go back to that question that got you on the path to recovery was, do I want to get well? Do I want help? Yes, I've fallen over, but do I still want to get well? Yes, I do. I don't want to return to that. I know the pain. I know the cycle. I know the mood swings. Learn to recognize that and get yourself back up again. And a friend of mine, similar addiction issues, said too that he sees himself as a lifelong alcoholic, that while he hasn't drunk for years now, he still considers himself as someone who may or may not have that possibility to fall back again. So recognizing that this is a lifelong new lifestyle choice, and recognizing that you still need to keep yourself safe and still need to maintain good mental health, and reaching out for help is important as part of living that new life.
Yeah, and I think I've grudgingly agreed or admitted that over the years. I didn't want to call myself an alcoholic. When I would go to AA meetings, I would say I'm Mark. I wouldn't say I'm Mark and I'm an alcoholic, because I didn't think I didn't like that word. But in actual fact, it's something that I have to not drink for the rest of my life. So I essentially have admitted that that's what I am.
Yeah.
And, the good thing is that once I stopped drinking, and I didn't want to sort of not talk about this a little bit, but the best thing about not drinking is I could start working on that depression stuff. I could start working on those other issues. All of a sudden, I could focus on the things that were really under the covers bothering me in the first place. And I was, there was no way I could do that while I was drinking, because I was medicated.
Well, do you think maybe that's probably where that period of you are grumpy for a while you're on that early part of recovery, is you're actually having to start to face the issues that you would normally say, blow that, I'm going to go reach out to my addiction. You're grumpy because you're like, I've got to face this thing now what?
Yeah, I remember having the thought more than once. I would say, oh my God, I'm feeling everything. I mean, I actually would think that, and it would be, stupid stuff like, where's the other sock? I only have one of my socks. And it would be like, oh my God, I'm feeling upset about this, to something much, much more complicated. And this stuff would really eat at me, because I didn't have anything to mask it like I'd been used to. And so, and obviously missing socks are not something that causes depression. But if you're depressed, things like missing socks can matter, or I can't seem to find a project, I can't find a client to work with,
or IT just isn't working for me today. My keyboard's screwed up, my webcam doesn't work. You just go, you hit full tilt, and I'm just really pissed right now.
People, I think, have a misconception about what depression is. It's not just about being sad. It's about being unable to cope with the things around you in a lot of ways. Before we turned on the video, we were talking a little bit about anger and loneliness and other things that sort of come into this, and it something like depression manifests differently in different people. But for me, it was this overabundance of feeling what was going on outside me. It's sort of like raw nerves, and so that was part of my struggle once I stopped drinking, is I had to deal with that part of who I am. And now I'm on some medication that helps. And I've done a lot of work myself to give myself coping mechanisms. And I'm saying all of this because I think it can help other people, not because I'm proud that I've done it. It's that nobody out there is alone. In reality, there are a lot of us who deal with this stuff. I've done some blog posts about my drinking problem. I think by sort of acknowledging my problem and letting other people know that I had it, maybe I can help some other people. And I think that's what you're trying to do here too. You realize that people out there, grow mustaches, but they don't necessarily focus on what's going on behind that. Why are you growing a mustache for Movember? It's so that these conversations, like the one we're having today, go on, and we raise some money to support the programs that will help improve men's health, but also get men talking about these things so that they can make their lives better. Yeah,
absolutely. It's giving permission for people around you to say, and it's that level and balance of vulnerability. Right. I know you've shared a lot of really authentic stuff from your journey and your recovery, and effectively what we're doing is we're turning that emergency light on in the planes when they talk about there'll be a lighting path that'll guide your way out, and here's the exit doors. Aim for those doors. Leave everything else behind. Don't take your baggage with you. Thanks, Marc, for sharing your story and for giving people some examples of this is the pathway out, and that mental health it's really important to just keep a check on yourself and develop good habits, and where you do need help to reach out for that help from those around you that care, and professionals when you need it too.
Yeah, and then I think you and I both agree. Life is too short. No matter how long your life is going to be, life is too short to go through it with this stuff hidden behind a door, or hidden under a bushel. It's important to try to take some steps that will make your life better, and it is possible. And the problem with a lot of the things that we've been talking about is that it doesn't feel possible until you make the decision to try it.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, look, thanks, Marc. It's been really good talking with you.
Thanks for asking me to talk. I appreciate it. I think you're doing a great thing here.
Oh, thank you. And look, for those who have tuned in or watched the video a bit later, look, do listen into what's been said here. I know, like, we've had Marc's video frozen the whole time. I didn't want to say it, but it's like,
sorry.
There's been only one talking head and one moving mo. But it's really worth thinking about, and if you really do want to get help, maybe today's the day to sort of think, that's it. I admit I have a problem. I'm going to go get some help, and you don't have to do it openly, publicly. Go talk to someone who has done this journey before. Heck, DM me if you want to as well, and I'll help point you in the right direction.
Yes, same on my end. Any awesome. Day can be the first day of the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's another Movember talk there. Again, thank you, Marc, for joining me. And, I am looking to try and continue to get sponsors for whatever's left for the month of Movember. But I think I'm keeping my Mo just as a way of reminding myself.
Looks very nice. I think you should.
Cool. Thanks, man. Right. So see you again. And thanks again, Marc, for joining.
Thanks a lot, Daryl.
Bye for now.